point, so you can start whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a Roxbury-based photographer, along with other things, but mostly that.
Oh, so thanks for returning. This is your second interview on Hoodgrown. We appreciate you coming back.
Of course, I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we like to start our interviews with the first question, as you know. Are you hood-grown? And if so, how does that influence your aesthetic?
Yeah, I mean, I am, as I said, I'm Roxbury-based, and I'm born and raised here. My whole family lives like across the street from me. I haven't gone far. So I would say I'm hood-grown because it's just like Roxbury is very important to me and really important to who I am, how I've developed, how I look at my art. And I started photography really to kind of highlight some of the dope shit that was happening in Roxbury that wasn't really being covered. So yeah,
for sure. Hood-grown. So I kind of like also want to just do like a mental check. Like, how are you feeling? How are you coping? How are you caring for yourself right now? Just how are you as a Black woman, as a Black artist right now, living?
It's I don't know if you've been experiencing this, but I'm like, oh, I'm fine. And then all of a sudden I'll like start crying randomly. Like, oh, I'll just like be really upset. I don't know if you heard like the new No Name song.
Yeah.
Just came out. Yeah, but I was just like, and I just like all this, so it's like, I feel like it's like anxiety and stress stays in your body in weird ways, right? Like you'd be like, oh, I'm totally fine. And then certain things will just be like, oh shit, what's happening, in the world. And, and I was talking to, so my friends, I'm light skinned, so I can't even imagine, the anxiety and the fear of, my dark skinned people in my life. So.
Yeah, that's real.
It's a weird time.
So we saw each other at a protest last week, was it, or 2 weeks ago, wherever it was?
Was that your mom?
Yeah, I was with my mom. My mom goes to all my protests with me.
That's so cute.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. She's a good support, a good ally. You need those.
Yeah.
As half white people, you understand. But what protests have you attended, and what has your experience been like at these protests as a protester?
That's a good question. I've been to 3, mostly one in Franklin Park, 2 in Dudley, or Nubian Square, sorry. It's been really interesting being both like a protester and a photographer. It's kind of interesting to kind of navigate that, because you want to be in it, but sometimes photography kind of like keeps you at a distance. Sometimes like it does sometimes keep you a little bit separate. So I'm kind of having to navigate like, when do I put my camera down and just like feel the moment, like be in the moment, and when do I put my when do I bring my camera out, and when do I like put on the photographer hat. And some of them have it's been so many people, which is dope, but also like kind of stressful for me. So I definitely have had to like take little breaks where I find like little corners where no one's at, just to like regroup, because it's just more people than I'm used to, and so it's kind of it's been interesting kind of navigating both photographer and protester, and kind of feeling things, but also wanting to like display the art,
Right. So you have chosen to shoot the movement in both black and white and in color. What is the meaning behind these choices? Why do you decide that some photos need to be in black and white and others deserve to be in color, or vice versa?
Yeah, I saw that question before and I was like, I wish I had a really good answer for that, but I really don't. I have no reasoning behind my choices. I think it's like, well, I think a couple of things is like, there's a lot of like really amazing protest photography going on. A lot of it is black and white, which I really love, but that's not always my my personal aesthetic, which is weird because I like usually just dress in black and white. But so I think it's like staying true to, I'm pretty consistent. I tend to use color a lot when I shoot. And also I think it's like, I don't know, that like during it, there's like certain colors that just like really pop to me. Like there's one I took of, I don't know what their names are, you know, the people with the orange vests
Yeah,
that
the
kind of help
Marshalls.
it. Yeah, thank you. And I was like, yo, this color is dope. And there's like gray, you know, around. So it's like I've really been picking up on some of the really beautiful colors that are happening, especially because a lot of people wear black, like wear all black to the protest. So like those certain colors that are like that come out are really really stand out to me. So I want to make sure to highlight those as well. And it is kind of like, you know, there's a lot of beauty and color and what's going on. So I want to highlight that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I do think it is interesting that a lot of photographers have chosen to shoot like primarily in black and white, the movement. And it makes it feel like they're just in collection with the other protests that have happened decades before us. And it's interesting how they can feel like they're just a whole collection of work together that way.
And it's like, it's interesting because it's dope. I don't know if you know the photographer Devin Allen. He's like one of my favorite photographers, but he shot like the Baltimore uprising, and he shoots in black and white. And I can't imagine his photos in color. Like it's like an interesting, like some people who's like photographs. I'm like, this is just meant to be black and white.
He shot the very famous Time cover, right, of the man running away, and then it says
the
like,
guy running.
It says like 1966, and then it crosses out and it says 2015.
Yeah, exactly.
For folks who don't know, and now it's coming out again, and they crossed it out and it says 2020.
And he actually shot the new one too, so he's had 2 time covers.
Wow. Yeah, so, amazing. So to continue with this kind of conversation of moods, but what moods are you trying to portray through the collection of the photos you're taking to document this movement? Like, what is the narrative you're trying to come across with your photos?
That's also a really good question, really challenging question, because I don't think I necessarily, when I shoot, I'm not like, let me look for a mood. Necessarily, but I do think it's really interesting. Like, I don't know if you notice a lot of my photos, like they're very individual based. So it's often like one, like the focus is on one person or 2 people. It's not usually like larger crowds. And so I think it's just really interesting that in like with the sheer number of people that go into this protest, like it's huge, right? It's like hordes of people, which is dope, but it's like really trying to find the fact that within these hordes of people, it's actually just individual people that are making up this horde, is individual people's work. So I really like being able to, I don't know if like pinpoint people in the crowd that I'm like, you know, like I feel your energy, I feel your mood, whatever's happening, and trying to capture that. And it's also important for me to, these crowds are really white, that were super white. And so it's important for me also to make sure I'm capturing Black and brown people that are there, because it would be really easy just to make it seem like we're not there. Just if you just shoot the crowd, super white.
It is, yeah. I mean, my mom has commented on this pretty much every time we go to a protest, to being like, wow, there's a lot of white people here. Like, not to say like, and it is a question of like, yeah, we want them there, obviously. Like, it's important that they are fighting the same fight, because this is more their problem than ours in the end, because they are the one who are pushing systemic racism in our society. And letting it, like, white supremacy, let that you know, last all these years. So they definitely need to be there, but at the same time, I totally get the sentiment of like being like, wow, you guys have even whitewashed our protests. Like, how do you do that? How is
this happening? And it's also like, I think I mentioned this to you. It feels like super, like, for me, I've been having a lot of conflicted feelings too, because it's in neighborhoods, like my neighborhoods, that are being so heavily gentrified. To see that huge horde of white people in Nubian Square is very unsettling to me. Do you know what I mean?
And the protest we were at, when folks were saying whose streets are streets, and hearing white folks repeating that over and over again, especially when we just renamed this space Nubian Square. I know, like, in the past, we've talked about the whole deal of Dudley becoming Nubian.
Yeah.
Like, Dudley was a slave master or slave trader, and then we went over to Nubian Square because obviously it's more of a celebration of blackness, but also the Nubian culture did their own slave trade. So we have a lot of
It's complicated.
it's complicated, but Nubia is more for us. I get it. It's a lot of layers, but it's a very weird feeling when you hear chants of white folks saying whose streets are streets in Nubian Square.
Yeah, and that's like, it feels like it's both like, thank you for being here. Also, there's so many of you. Also, I'm very triggered
Yeah.
in a very real way by like the sheer number of black neighborhoods. And like, literally, I've had friends be like, yo, what's happening today? It's like all these like white people have signs and they didn't even make eye contact with me. You know what I mean? And it's like this like interesting, I think it's like this really interesting thing that's happening, and so yeah, it's important for me to capture black and brown faces in black and brown neighborhoods. Like, I'm not necessarily going to like Brookline protests or anything like that, because that's not really that's not my hood.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not gonna,
There's no need to go. I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about this slightly when we saw each other at the protest, but this is a big question, and we'll see how much of this we can tackle in this interview. But how are you feeling as a biracial person and artist in this time? I know it's like, like, knowing and feeling the empowerment and want to like strengthen and highlight your blackness, but also feeling the interior or like internal, not white guilt, because we can't possibly have white guilt. So that's just not possible. Because yeah, I get it, we're half white, but we're not. No one can identify us as white. No one can look at us and be like, "That's a white girl right there, and she gets all the privileges white girls get." No.
Yeah.
But how are you feeling living in the duality of a lot of us feeling like, when we first talked about Black Lives Matter back in like 2015 or whatever, 2013, we were saying it wasn't a black-white issue. It was the police brutality issue. Now, this new conversation we're opening up, we're realizing it is a white issue. It's a white onto blacks issue. And it's like, as biracial people, you're always aware of our history and the conflict of our ancestors. We're aware of that conflict. But how are you just navigating the space? How are you feeling? How are you creating art? And how are you identifying right now?
Yeah, I'm having a full-on like existential crisis, to be real. I literally, like, when I was talking, I was on the phone with my friend who's also biracial, and she's light skin like me, and I was like, what do we do? Because there's like it's like a really interesting conflict, because there's a lot of there's a lot of things like, here's what white people do, right? Like, here's what you need to do. And some of them I'm like, does this apply to me? Is this mine too? Do I do this? So it's like this interesting, or like, even at the protest, there's one part where it's like, black people put your hands up, like white people give them energy. And I was like, I was like doing both, because I was like my fist halfway down, kind of up, middle way. So it's like this, it's kind of like a constant wheel of like, what feels like mine and what feels like not mine, and when should I be white and when should I not be white? And it's like, I don't think there's necessarily an answer to that. Or if there is, let me know, because I'm over here trying to figure it out. But it's like, and holding white family accountable when it feels hard. It feels, it feels very challenging. I don't know if it feels like it to you, but it feels like, because it feels like such a personal attack. It's not like I'm necessarily defending other people. I'm like defending myself in a way. And so it feels, yeah, it feels like very personal. It feels very challenging, and my voice is cracking, sorry. And it feels, it's like I haven't really figured out the exact, like, how to be the best light-skinned person I can be to help support, darker skinned people. Like, should I say we when we're talking about, like, am I allowed to say that? Is that, like, offensive to people? Like, I write haikus with my photos, and I often been saying we, and I'm trying to figure out if that's actually appropriate, if it's we or if it's they. So
No, I totally understand like all of those like thoughts or feelings about our current duality, or we've always had this duality that we've been living in, but it's kind of just the spotlight's on it even more right now. And
and it feels very like it does feel like such a black and white issue now, as you're saying. So it's like really interesting to be like, Black people do this, white people do this, and then
we're here.
And then it's like the middle, which is challenging. And it's, obviously colorism comes into play. Like, I have, dark skinned biracial friends who are like Black all the way. Me, I'm like, if I want to, I could really pass as white easy, so it's like, it's like an interesting, thing. And then some people have the notion of like, if you look white, you're white, like that's it. And then some people don't have that. So
there's definitely the politics of just like presenting, how you present. And I mean that's another story when we talk about trans rights and Black people's rights and protecting Black women. There's a lot of layers for us to have to be dealing with right now.
So many layers. And it's also interesting too, because it's like I would never ever in a million years be like, to my dark-skinned Black friends, be like, I don't know what to do. Like, help me. Like, I don't know how
it's
to
not their burden.
This. No. And I also don't think, like, I wouldn't go to white people and have that conversation either. So it's like, it's interesting, like, seeking out biracial people, being like, how do you feel right now? Because it's like, really, they're the only ones that are like, oh, okay, can settle in it, can understand the conflict.
Because we definitely have benefited from the privilege of our looks, but at the same time have been marginalized because of them as well. So
it's like, that's how we know it exists, because we have both.
Like, how is it
both things?
It happens to us simultaneously. Like, I can
at the same time,
the same exact time, I could have the same feeling. It's really strange. But to kind of contrast that, your work has always been about Black joy to me when I've looked at your photos in the past. How are you finding some joy during this time, if at all?
I'm fine. Like, one thing that I find super beautiful is like, Black photographers are really dope though, because like, really, they are just like, the way that they support each other at this time has been like so beautiful to see, that it like fills my heart. Like, this is like no competition. It's no like people are highlighting each other. Like, there's like posts that are like, highlight Black photographers, and Black photographers who aren't on the list will tag other Black photographers. They won't even say themselves. They're highlighting other people. Like, it's like this beautiful, and there's like so many dope Black Boston photographers, like, OJ Slaughter, I'm not even gonna say names. I'll give you all the all the Instagrams of people who I follow who are dope, because but and it's just really, like, really nice to see their work. It's really nice to see kind of the like friendships that are building with it, supporting each other. And it's funny because I feel like white photographers have this notion of like, we're going to let this, like, they're really into being like, we're going to sit this one back and let you all do it. You deserve it. I'm like,
oh yeah. Didn't you, at the protest, you mentioned to me that there was a white photographer that decided to only photograph a black photographer shooting the protest? Am I correct?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was like, cool, but also like you're making a big deal about it, and you could have just done it without like, you know what I mean? So it's like this really interesting thing where I'm like, white photographers are like stepping back, and which is great, but also it's like, yeah, we're shooting it better than you could anyway. So it's like, frankly, like, not to be a jerk, but like the black photographers I've seen have been doing some really dope work because it's really personal to them. And I can tell.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, but that's been bringing me a lot of joy.
Dope.
Seeing all that.
Dope. So what's next for you in your work as you kind of explore the reopening of the world right now, as we continue to protest? We're actually, you know, recording on Juneteenth. How are you celebrating? What's going on for you? What's up?
Oh, yo, I don't know. There's like, I haven't figured out what I want to do today. No.
Celebrate.
Celebrate. I want to start. I got, actually, this is kind of dope. I got my film camera, like a film Nikon from it was passed on from my grandfather who passed away, and my cousin was storing it, and he was like, do you want it? And I was like, yes. And I don't know how to use it, and so it's on my to-do list to figure out how to, like, I want to use it, because I was like, that's really cool that I have my, you know, grandfather's camera, and it's just fitting. So I want to, that's like my goal, is to try to figure out how to use
that camera. Dope.
That sounds Nikon, which I've never used. So yeah, it's nothing big, but that's like something I'm just like looking at it sitting on my dresser over there. I was like, I want to learn how to use this.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Dope.
Yeah. What are you doing for Juneteenth?
You know, BPS hasn't declared it a holiday yet, so I'm teaching today. Unfortunately, it's kind of the last day of school. Monday's our real last day of school, but we're not holding like classes. It's just like awards day and meetings. But you know, it's pretty much, my students have not taken me quite too seriously past April. Like, as a collective, I mean, most BPS kids have been like, meh. So
yeah, frankly, they're like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah. So I'm just hoping in September I can wrangle them back in when we can hopefully get into the building.
Yeah, no, I feel that.
But thank you so much for talking to me again. I appreciate you, and I appreciate the work you're doing. Keep doing it. Last question. Oh, thanks. Last question. Where can the people find you? Where can they find your work?
I actually don't got a website, but you can follow me on Instagram. Mills5.
Dope. I'll have that in the show notes. And if there's a way for people to support you, maybe we can put a Venmo or Cash App in there too. That'd be cool.
Sure. Why not?
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Of course. Thank you. Appreciate it.